everybody, it's Lisa Joy Young, and I am starting a new series called Back to the Basics, where I go over the very basics of face painting techniques. I realized I don't have anything like this on my channel, and I thought it'd be a good idea to go over these things in more detail. So this is the first video in this series, and it's going to be about activating your paint and getting different paint textures to achieve different looks when you're doing face painting or body painting. First of all, I'm using all Kryvaline paint. It's important to know that each paint brand is different, so you might have to use a little more water or a little less water depending on what paint brand you use. Not only that, but each color is different, so you just have to get to know your paints. For instance, white takes a lot more water to activate than red, so you're going to have to get to know each of your colors and paint brands as you go along in your face painting adventure. So the first thing I'm going to go over is activating white. I get so many questions a day saying, I have Kryvaline white just like you, but it doesn't look as white as your white. How do you get your whites to look so vibrant and opaque? And here's the secret. You got to activate the crap out of this. Excuse my language. So I think that what most people are doing and what their mistake is that they're not taking enough time to activate the paint. So you can activate by spraying it with water like I did just now, or you can dip your paintbrush in water and then let the water fall onto the paint. I prefer spraying it because you're sure to always get clean water and you won't muddy up your color. Okay, so a lot of people would have just ended there. I sprayed my paint, I activated it, it's looking kind of creamy, and a lot of people would have ended right there and started painting. No, 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 keep going. You don't have to do this every time, but the first time you're using your white for the day at an event, really work into it. Pull up a lot of that color, and what you're doing is you're saturating the water. The more you work your brush into it, the more you're saturating that water and working up the color. I like to start my event by activating my whole cake of white. I don't do this for my black, and I'll tell you why in a second. So my whole cake gets activated, I twist off what I don't need, and then I have a really nicely activated cake. Of course, it'll start to dry up, so whenever you go back to use it, just give it one, maybe two more squirts, reactivate quickly, and you're good to go. That's all you'll have to activate it moving forward from there. But your first activation takes some time, and as you can see now, I have really vibrant white opaque, okay? And it'll stay like that. It'll fade, it'll absorb some of the color you put above it, but if you activate it correctly, it'll stay nice and vibrant. So that's how to activate your white for line work. Now black I do a little bit differently than my white. I don't activate the whole thing, and it takes a lot less effort to activate. Usually I find the deepest section of my black. If there's a hole in my black, that's ideal, but if you can see here, that's my deepest section. I take my spray bottle and I spray just that section, and I'm gonna work up a little pond of black. I hope that you guys can see what I'm talking about. But I have a little well of black paint going on here. So let's see if I can get in the light so you can see. Okay, so right here is just a pool of black inky liquid that I'm working on, okay? So I'm making my black line work, and I do this at the beginning of every event too. This also will dry up. All you have to do is give it another little spray and quickly reactivate. You won't have to do this whole long process in the beginning. Okay, so now I have a little well of my inky black liquid. You don't want it to be as thick and creamy as the white. You want it to be more watery. Because if it's more watery, you can get really thin lines, and it doesn't have to be as thick as the white because it's black, so it's going to naturally just be more opaque without having to have that really thick creamy consistency. So I have my inky consistency paint now, and I just have a little well of it. So this is, and when I take it off my brush, so I'll get it in there, and then I twist my brush out of it onto the cake, so I have a nice point there. And this is the perfect consistency for outlining. All right, because it's a little wetter, you'll be able to outline for longer without reloading your brush. If it's super thick, you're going to have to reload your brush more. So always try to have your black or any outline color more on the inky side. See, I could just keep going and going and going because I made sure that my paint was not too thick. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to activate your paint to load a brush that you're painting over a large area. Once again, I like to spray it. You're going to put quite a bit of water on there. And I'm just going to really work my brush into it. I'm not stopping there. A lot of people might stop there. Don't stop there. This is the first time this paint's getting activated today, so it's going to take more effort. Be prepared to take more effort to activate your paint first thing, all right? So what I'm looking for is a really thick, nice, creamy consistency that's not so wet that it drips, but it's not so dry that it will not cover a large area. I want to get a good amount on my brush to cover a really large area very opaquely and evenly. Okay, so the consistency of my paint, if you can see here, is nice and thick now and creamy, so that looks good. Just going to get all that on my brush, and I have extra here to go back to now on my cake. And now this will really easily and quickly cover a large area. If I need to, I can go back and get extra paint that had been activated to continue covering. Okay, so I'm going to show you right now how using different paint consistencies can come to your advantage to get different looks and techniques. So to do this base color, I got the paint nice and creamy and I put a ton of it on my brush. Now one of the techniques that I love to do is I love to take a contrasting color like this pink and flick it and dry brush it over a base color. To make this work, you have to make sure your base color is dry, number one, and it always looks the best when you use like really bright different colors. So I'm going to be using this pink. Now I'm only going to give it, I'm going to start with one spray because whereas the base color was wet and creamy, we want this color, the contrasting color, to be more dry and sticky. You want it to have a sticky consistency. Now if you get too much paint or too much water in your paint like I just did, all you do is wipe your brush off on a paper towel. I don't have that, so I'm just going to brush some off onto my hand and get some more until it's a drier, stickier consistency, and you can test it out by flicking your brush. If you flick your brush like this and it fades off at the end, you know you're doing good. Okay, but you have to make sure it's really thick and sticky so it shows up over this. If it's too creamy or watery, this color will show through too much and it won't look as good. So you have to get that nice and thick and sticky, and then you just press your brush and flick up like that. So the color is nice and opaque at the top, and then it fades out into that blue color. So press, press, and you can just go as far down as you want. And as you can see, I'm just lifting up my brush like that. I really like blending two colors together like this because it's not a neat blend. It's more of a messy blend. See there, this is with my paint even stickier. It gives it more of like a rustic vintagey look. I don't know, it's really cool. So now most of the paint's off my brush. It's just that like really dry sticky paint that's left. So you can go through and just use that dry paint to blend it a little further. Other uses for the really thick and sticky consistency for paint are for stencils. That's the consistency you want when you do stencils. And also if you use a rounded flat brush like this, you can make the paint consistency sticky and dry for easy and fast wings. So you just press and flick your brush like this, so you get a nice opaque beginning, and then it fades out. And then you can do really cool, really fast, like feathery looking wings like this. And then just tip the edges once more to give it even more dimension like that. And that's a really fast and easy way to make fluffy, feathery wings. Alright, so we've gone over creamy paint, inky paint, sticky paint. Now we're going to go over watery paint and what the uses for this are. Basically with watery paint, you're going for dripping effects, and shadowing. So for the dripping, I'm going to use red, and red is one of those colors that takes less water to activate. It doesn't absorb the water as quickly as some of the other paints. So you don't have to put too much on it. But, so here would be an outlining consistency, which is like a creamyish, more watery, but we're gonna make this super duper watery because we want it to drip, for a dripping effect. And this is great for if you want to flick color onto something like this. This is the consistency you need it to be, so you can just get a bunch on, and you can do it on a business card or just flick it like I am here. Alright? Or you can use it for dripping. So how you would do that is just dot it along, and it's important that obviously what you're dotting it on is vertical. It can't be horizontal, so sorry if you're having a harder time seeing because of that. And then just continue adding your really wet paint to where you want it to drip. If it's not dripping fast enough, like mine isn't here, I'm going to add more water. I'm not really even going to activate it. I'm just going to add the water. And until, there we go. Now I want to get another drip going over here. So I'm going to add more. Once it starts dripping, it's going to drip for a really long time. And if it starts to drip out of where you want it to, so if it starts to drip off of your client's face or whatever part, all you have to do is just touch the drip like that and remove some of that water, and it'll stop the dripping process. Another technique to use a watery paint for is shadows, but this is going to be even more watery than what I just showed you. So to make paint to use for shadows, just put a little bit of paint on your hand, and then what you're going to do is take water, and you're going to just pull a tiny bit of that paint out, just like so. So now we have this very watery, faded black color, and that's perfect for shading. If it's not dark enough to your liking, you can grab just a tiny bit more out of your little blob there, pull a little more out, and then you'll have a little bit of a darker shade color. The last paint consistency we're going to talk about is a dry consistency. So this is different than the sticky because the stickiness has more moisture to it. This is going to be dry, and generally this is used for shadowing. So you can do the really watery, wet technique for shadowing, or you can use the dry brush. And you can either activate your brush on a wet wipe so that your brush gets moistened but not too wet, or you can just dip your brush in water and then dry the excess water off. And what you're going to do is just barely, you're in dry paint here, not wet paint. It has to be dry. So you have your damp brush, not wet brush, and dry paint, not wet paint. And you're going to run your brush in that dry paint. Always test it out first. You can get the excess off really quickly so that you're left with very little on your brush. Now I just painted a quick flower, and I'm going to show you how I would shade using this dry paint. So I have very little on my brush at this point, and I'm just going to go along, and as you can see, it has just kind of a powdery effect at this point. And if it's easy for you to use powder, by all means use powder instead of. Alright, so this is basically what's on the brush. It's very little, you can see there. And you're just going to use your tip to scrub in the shadow color.